Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Media, here today with a video on the most common GM LS3 engine problems. The GM LS3 engine was primarily used in the 2008 to 2013 Chevy Corvette and 2010 to 2015 Camaro SS. There are a couple different applications of the GM LS3 engine in Holden vehicles. However, the Camaro and Corvette are really the two primary vehicles. With the Camaro, I do want to point out one additional engine variant that is based on the LS3, and that is the L99 variant of the LS3 engine. This is found in 2010 to 2015 Camaro SS's with the automatic transmission. There are a couple differences in that engine that will tie into a problem I discuss later on in this video, specifically issues with AFM or active fuel management. So just wanted to point that out up front before diving into the bulk of this video. With that being said, as with pretty much any GM LS engine or LS based engine, the LS3 is a very reliable and strong engine. However, it isn't without its share of issues that are more common than other problems on the LS3 engine. However, despite a few of these common problems with the LS3, one important thing to note is that the LS3 is a very popular, well-known engine, something that's very popular for engine swaps, big power builds, and a lot of different things in the car world. So fortunately with the LS3, a lot of these problems are very well known and very well understood, which means there are effective long-term solutions, fixes, and upgrades for a lot of these common problems on the LS3 that I will be discussing. With that said, let's go ahead and jump in and discuss the most common problems on the LS3 V8 engine. Number one on the list, we have water pump failure. Issues with the water pump are certainly among the most common issues, if not the single most common problem on the LS3 engine. The most common cause of failure or issues with the pump is it simply leaking a little bit of coolant, so really not a huge or severe issue if you do run into that form of water pump failure. Of course, you don't want that coolant leaking for too long, especially if the leak grows and gets bigger. So it is still something that's important to fix sooner than later if you're noticing a leaking water pump. However, you may also run into impeller issues or other problems with the water pump. And in these situations, that can lead to much more serious and sudden onset problems with the water pump that could drastically reduce coolant flow or essentially completely eliminate coolant flow, which will then allow the engine to overheat very rapidly. So if you run into this sort of water pump failure, it is a lot more serious and something that you really need to get repaired as soon as possible. Any form of extended or severe overheating can cause additional failures and serious problems, not just with the LS3, but with any other engine. In the grand scheme, this is a very minor, inexpensive, and simple repair, so nothing to really hold against the GM LS3 engine. Moving on to our second most common problem, we have bent push rods. So a lot of people love the simplicity of the LS3 with its older school push rod design. However, unfortunately, despite the simplicity of push rod engines, that is a significant problem with the LS engines and specifically the LS3, is that bent push rods are a rather common problem. Now, fortunately, compared to traditional or modern double overhead cam systems, these push rods are very simple and easy to replace. So that is the one benefit of these bent push rods, is oftentimes if you do run into this issue, it doesn't cause any other concern or problems with the engine once you get those push rods replaced, and it is a very simple and easy, inexpensive job compared to replacing something in the cylinder head or valve train of a double overhead cam or overhead cam engine. When it comes to bent push rods, really one of the most common causes of this is over revving the engine. The LS3 with its stock valve train, and especially these stock push rods, really doesn't like being over revved, so revving the engine really much past 6,600 RPMs can be dangerous to these push rods, so something to be aware of there. And another thing that can cause bent push rods is upgrading your camshaft with too aggressive of a cam and not addressing the push rods in the process. A lot of the times if you look for a full cam kit, it will include the push rods, especially if it's a camshaft upgrade that's aggressive enough that really necessitates upgrading the push rods. Last couple comments about the push rods. A lot of the times it can even be hard to even identify that you have a bent push rod, especially if it's just a small bend. However, a couple symptoms include ticking sounds, misfires, rough idle, and poor performance of the engine. So if you're noticing any of those signs and symptoms or a check engine light, that could certainly be a sign of a bent pushrod on the LS3, which is certainly one of the more common issues on these engines. Last but not least, moving on to our third and final common problem, we have issues with the L99 AFM lifters. So again, this isn't something that really is a concern or an issue at all on the standard LS3 engine, which did not include active fuel management. However, on the L99 variant found in the 2010 to 2015 Camaro SS, specifically with the automatic transmission, did receive active fuel management and active fuel management lifters, and that is a very well-known and understood issue on not just the LS3 and L99, but essentially any of these AFM engines are known to have a lot of problems with the lifters, and unfortunately, compared to what I discussed before in this video with the water pump and push rods both being very simple, relatively inexpensive repairs, when you do run into issues with lifters, it can be a lot more catastrophic and really a much more expensive and costly repair. So something to be on the lookout for and something to consider if you are in the market for a 2010 to 2015 automatic Camaro SS with the LS3 L99 variant. Fortunately, there are a number of different solutions for mitigating the risks of AFM and lifter related issues. So one solution is upgrading your camshaft and opting for a non-AFM setup. So this would actually completely eliminate your AFM lifters, and then you'd have block off plates to essentially completely eliminate AFM, and this would of course require tuning. The next route that you can go is actually tuning the vehicle with a tune or custom tune. You can actually completely disable the AFM system. In this case, of course, you still have all of the AFM components in place. You're simply turning off the system and allowing it to run in full V8 mode at all times. And then the last option is simply going to be disabling the AFM with an AFM disabler. We actually have one here, our Boost AFM DFM disabler. It's very simple. It just plugs into the OBD2 port of the vehicle and essentially sends a constant CAN bus signal to prevent AFM from activating, which again, just like with tuning, you'll still have all of the AFM components in place. These AFM disablers will simply prevent the active fuel management from actually engaging and shutting off some of the cylinders of the engine. So ultimately, whatever route you go, these are all great options for preventing or mitigating AFM and lifter issues. Completely deleting the lifters with a cam upgrade is really the most bulletproof solution. However, tuning and AFM disablers are both great options. Anyway, that really wraps up the most common problems for the GM LS3 engine. So in summary of some of these common problems and overall reliability of the engine, again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, the LS3 really is a very reliable engine. It still does have its share of issues, as I discussed with the water pump and bent push rods. However, fortunately, both of these issues are very minor in the grand scheme. Push rods are relatively easy and cheap to replace, and water pumps are a common problem on many different engines. And with the LS3's pump being mechanical, it is relatively inexpensive and easy to replace. Lastly, I talked about issues with active fuel management and lifter failure on the L99 variant of the LS3. While this can be a serious, costly issue, fortunately there are solutions to this, as I discussed, with either deleting AFM altogether, tuning it out, or running a simple AFM disabler like our Boost device here, which is $150, simply plugs into the OBD2 port, so inexpensive, very easy to use, and these are great solutions to really help prevent and mitigate the risk of lifter failure on the AFM equipped LS3 engines. Anyway guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more in the future. Thanks everyone.